thank you all very much for coming. Good afternoon and welcome to this Career Conversations panel about discovering careers in higher education, sponsored by the Alumni Relations Office. So we'd like to thank them very much for their generous support in these initiatives. And this panel in particular is being offered in partnership with the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies, the Center for Student Success there. So we'd like to thank them for partnering with us on this and for all of their support. So the purpose of this panel is to provide you with inspiration. We hope that hearing career stories of these professionals will help to inspire you along your own career journeys. Another purpose is to offer insight and advice so that you can learn about what it's really like to work in higher education and how you might get your own career started. And this is also an opportunity to connect and network with alumni who are working in a field of interest. So the format of today's panel will have approximately an hour of discussion. So I'll start us off with a few questions and then we'll focus on the questions that you've brought along with you. So think of questions now that you'd like to ask, and as the panelists are speaking, if something, if you'd like more information on something, think about that, and you're welcome to ask when we do our Q&A portion. And we will end today's panel promptly at 4 o'clock p.m. So after the hour-long discussion, there will be an hour of mix and mingle where you'll get to ask more individual questions of the panelists. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We've got Lucy Fromowitz here from the University of Toronto, Lara Ubaldi from York University, Jamie Kunkel from University of Guelph-Humber, Courtney Mallam, who's also with York but from Glendon, and Reginald on the end. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists now to introduce themselves, and I'd like to just get you each to introduce yourselves with what your role is right now and some of your daily responsibilities within your current organization. So starting with Reginald.
Sure. Hi, my name is Reggie. I work here at York University. I also work at OCAD University and at Seneca College. I'm an instructor, so I'm a teaching assistant here, but I also do some course director positions at OCAD and at Seneca. I've worked at York since 2004. I've been a student here since 1991, so I can't seem to get enough of this place. I always seem to end up back here. I teach courses in critical thinking, in English, and in humanities here at York, at OCAD, and at Seneca. I've completed my TESOL at U of T, and so I'm teaching university-level ESL courses as well. Some of my key responsibilities are leading tutorials. I do some lecturing, marking, students' daily work, and meeting with students about any issues they may be having in their courses as well. So,
thank you. Courtney?
Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Courtney. I'm the print and digital media coordinator at Glendon campus. A lot of my key roles involve getting our website content as best as it possibly can be for future students, so I work in the recruitment side, but a lot of what I oversee also addresses content that the current students consume. So specifically that means academic advising, student financial services, what is the Glendon equivalent of the registrar's office, that kind of stuff. I also manage all of our social media profiles. So we have, officially we're on Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So I also manage all of those with the content coming out of those platforms. I also manage a team of 17 e-ambassadors, and those are the students that we have who are blogging about Glendon life, talking about all of the different programs that we have and opportunities as students. And they all do work study things. I also oversee all of our print stuff. So what that means for me is I manage our recruitment handbook, which is about a 100-page document that we send out to all of our prospective students at the university fair and then classroom visits over the course of the year.
Great.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and I'm a Career and Placement Service Coordinator at the University of Guelph-Humber. So there's three main parts to my job. The first part is I oversee the placement approval process from 2 of the programs at the university at the undergraduate level. I also The second part, which is kind of related to that, is employer development. So I oversee, part of my job is to source placement opportunities as well as employment opportunities for students at the university and alumni at the university. And event management as well related to that, so getting employers on campus for career-related events. And then the third part of my job is career services, so working with students on how to apply for jobs successfully, going over their resume and cover letters, interview skills. I run workshops in class, and I also supervise 4 work-study students who are career support peers who also run workshops and help do resume critiques as well.
I'm Lara Ubaldi, and I am currently the project lead for a new student transition program here at York University called UStart. And I've had quite a number of careers at York University. I've reinvented myself over the length of my career here at York. But my current job is designing and developing a new student transition program that will help onboard new students to York University. And it has 3 components. We are moving our traditional enrollment appointment to an online environment. The second component is an online learning community, which runs for the duration of the summer. And the third component is an in-person event. So my current job is a lot of development and working collegially across the campus to develop new supports for students at York.
Hi, I'm Lucy Fromowitz. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Student Life at U of T. And my career began here at York for some 20 years. Then I moved into the college sector as the Vice President, and that's a long story we'll get to later. Currently, I have within my portfolio 13 departments that serve students. So it is the student-facing central departments. I'm not going to name all 13 because I probably can't. But if you think of them in groupings, academic support, so that's accessibility, academic success. Then there's the health and wellness cluster, so health services, counseling services, health promotions. And there are the other clusters of student development, so multi-faith center, Aboriginal student services, career center, and on and on and on. I sometimes jokingly say that my job description is I attend meetings, but I like to think that there's a purpose to that. So I have the extreme pleasure of working with fabulous people within my portfolio, but I would say really what my job is building relationships. We like to say at U of T, because of our governance structure, which is different than York, that we work horizontally across vertical structures. So there's faculties and colleges, etc., and the central student services cut across it all. So much of my job is building those partnerships, because if a central division works independently, we will not build a sustainable model. So if we're building a co-curricular record or a new process or program, we need our partners, because our students, like all of you, are embedded and belong to communities like colleges, like faculties. There are no students attached to a career center, a health center. So that's primarily my job. That and putting out fires, or if I'm doing my job right, anticipating the fires, addressing them so that they don't pop up.
Well, thank you. So you're all working in very diverse roles. I'd like to ask each of you now to briefly share an overview of your career story. So a little bit about how you became interested in what you're currently doing now, where you started your career, and how you got to where you are today. And if you'd like, you can also talk about your education, because you're all York alum, so that might be relevant. So let's start with you, Lucy.
Oh, great. How many of you currently have a job, work, study, any position here at the university? Hands up. Okay, that's a place to start, by the way. If you are thinking of working in post-secondary, there is no better place to start than when you're a student in post-secondary. And that, frankly, is how just about all the folks that worked for me at York, worked for me at Centennial, or work in my division at U of T come up through their experiences here at their own college or university. So I graduated. I'll just say my student number starts with 7.5. Do you remember those decades at all? So following graduation, I was in a position that most of you find yourself in, which is not really sure what direction, but I knew my university and I had worked there. So I started as the receptionist in the Faculty of Environmental Studies when Environmental Studies was on the top floor of the Scott Library, and it was a wonderful place to work. What I didn't realize at the time was that I had started on my career with that choice. So the first thing is find your passion. And there is no in my humble opinion, there's no better place to work than in post-secondary. Because number one, the product is education. And education is the great equalizer for all of us. So right there, you start with a noble cause. And secondly, you get to work with this demographic. So you're always trying to run as fast as you can to stay current, to understand changes in learning and student needs. So what happened was I worked my way up at York. I had 9 jobs in total, 9 or 10, I don't recall. But I will tell you, what I was doing at the time was not what I was thinking of working up the ladder. What I was doing was looking for things of interest. So you try and master the position you're in, spend a few years there, because a little word of caution, we're not very fond of students who come in and after 2 weeks say, oh look, another job, I think I'll go over there. So master the area you're in, look for opportunities to engage in change and committees beyond that. And then that led to an opportunity for the next job and the next job and the next job. And so about 20 years at York. My last job was as the director of admissions and recruitment here. And in that role, I had a wonderful opportunity. I'll speed it up. I had a wonderful opportunity. It was a time when the ministry mandated that some programs, beginning with nursing, which were embedded in the college sector, had to have degree completion. So York was working with 3 colleges, and I was privileged to be one of the people negotiating those arrangements. It was Seneca, Durham, and who was the third? Georgian. So that exposed me to the college sector. So I spent quite a while working on the partnerships on behalf of York. And then what does happen as you move up in your career is people come and get you. So then I was tapped on the shoulder by a college, Centennial College. I had an opportunity to apply there as the Vice President of Student and Community Engagement. Wonderful job, where it was kind of a mishmash of wonderful things. So it's everything I did at York, all the student services, the library, the alumni office, the fundraising office. Colleges are interesting places. You have great opportunity to do a lot of things. And then after about 6 years, I was contacted by U of T, who had just undergone a review. They had a lot of different departments. I have 13 now, there were many more. Consultation said, put them all together, hire someone, and really organize them into a student-facing way that really serves students. And that's where I began my career about 6 years ago at U of T.
Great. Well, when I started at York, I wanted to be a teacher. I was going to be a grade 2 teacher. And then for those of you who are interested in education, you'll know you have to volunteer in a classroom, right? To prepare yourself for your application for education. So I started volunteering in classrooms, and I thought, wait a minute. I knew they could tie their shoes. I knew they knew when they had to go to the bathroom at grade 2. Maybe this isn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. So I thought to myself, maybe this isn't the right fit for me. I thought, what am I going to do now? But I was here on campus. I was living in residence, this one in particular, Tatum Hall residence down the hall. And I started to get really, really involved in campus life. I ran for student government. I was on the board that, you know, the student center over there across the way. I was on the board that actually built the student center, all as a student volunteer here at York. I had so many opportunities to learn. And at one point, a faculty member tapped me on the shoulder and said, I know you're interested in education. We're doing this partnership with the Toronto District School Board. And I know you're interested in becoming a teacher, right? I thought, no, I'm really not. And the professor said, I'd like you to help administer this program. And so I found myself as a student working with the Toronto District School Board, placing other students in the classroom in schools around the York catchment area. And I thought, well, I'm pretty good at this administration stuff. And I got really interested in administering education for other people. That led to work in York's president's office, where I supported policy work for President Marsden at the time, which led to some years working in admissions at Osgoode Hall Law School, which led to doing large-scale event planning with the conference center here at York, which led to thinking about, well, there's all these departments at York. How does this university really work? Like it's like a whole community at York University. How does this work? And I started thinking about studying as an academic discipline university governance. So while I was working full-time here at York, I did a Master's of Education at OISE at U of T focusing on academic governance at universities and systems of higher education. Following that, I had the education and the skills to equip me to support a faculty council, which means how professors make decisions about the curriculum, how courses are approved, how degree programs are approved at the university. And I supported academic governance, working with the University Senate for a number of years, which led to undergraduate student advising, because of course then I understood how the courses were approved and how degrees were approved. That led to academic advising for a number of years, which allowed me to be a bit creative. And about 3 years ago, I worked with some faculty members and some staff members here at York University to actually propose a new program, a new way of doing things, a new student transition at York that was subsequently approved at York. And we have been working on building this pilot in new student transition for the last 3 years. So quite a meandering path, but tremendous opportunity to learn at the university. I've been here for a long while, over 25 years as a student and then an employee. Sometimes it feels like a really long time. Often it doesn't, because I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly gathering skills and bringing them to a new opportunity at the institution. So it's been a wonderful path, and I wouldn't trade that for teaching grade 2s.
So when I came to York, I wanted to go to Osgoode Hall Law School. That was my game plan when I graduated high school. And I took a year of law and society and was bored to tears. So I switched my major to psychology, got to my 4th year and was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with the psychology degree. So I had worked with children for a little bit in the summers, just at a daycare. I decided to take autism and behavioral sciences at just a college certificate program at George Brown and work with children with autism. I knew I wanted to be helping people. So I took that program. I had a couple of placements. I ended up working with children with autism for about a year and a half. and was exhausted. It was a really rewarding career, but I realized I wanted to be helping and teaching, but not necessarily with young children. So definitely took that experience being in that field to realize it wasn't for me. And I sort of started to do a bit of soul searching while I was still in the field, and just looking at jobs that were out there. And a job at the York Career Centre actually was posted, working with students with job search techniques and job search advising. And I thought, you know, I would actually be pretty interested in that. And so I looked over the qualifications, ended up going back to school for career and work counseling, so a college diploma. And during that diploma, I had 2 placements, and the second placement was at this career center. So just last year, from October 2012 to December 2012, I was here doing career services with Liz, actually. And from there, once I had graduated, I was doing temp work on the York campus. I realized with that experience, I really wanted to work at the university setting. And so I joined the temp agency and was doing some administrative work on campus. And a position came up at the University of Guelph-Humber in June. And I applied and I interviewed, and it went really well. And here I am today. So I'm still fairly new in my career, but I'm learning more and more each day. And I absolutely love what I do. I love connecting with students. I love feeling like I'm making a difference and helping, but I don't necessarily have to do any of the marking papers or grading like a teacher would, or you know, helping kids tie their shoes. So it's been a great experience so far.
Okay. So ever since I've been little, I've been obsessed with telling stories. Even in grade 2, my grade 2 teacher gave us this one assignment, and we had to write a story. In grade 2s, normally you write one story, maybe a paragraph, do a little picture, then you're done, right? Like, my stories were epic novels, pages and pages and pages, and I'd want them laminated, and I want to illustrate them, and I don't like this color binding, can we switch this color binding to another color? Like, I was the biggest pain for my grade 2 teacher. So I always knew that I had this thing for writing, and I've also always had a thing for being creative, so it was evident in the color of binding and my illustrations in these ridiculously long books written by an 8-year-old. So writing, creativity, always big for me. The other thing that was always big for me was organizing things, and most specifically organizing people in a way that's going to help them. So also when I was younger, I'd make these clubs and put all this work into creating these beautiful posters, and then my mom was horrified because I was posting all these posters around my neighborhood. She's like, "Oh my God, you're 7 and you're putting our phone number up on phone pole. Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "What's the problem, man?" So I've always had this penchant for making things happen and drawing people together in a community. I didn't know it was an actual career, and I definitely didn't know that working as a university administrator was a career, and I don't think anybody really rolls out of bed when they're 5 years old and say, "I'm going to be administrator, this is going to be fantastic." So when I started applying for universities, all I knew was I wanted to write. So I applied for journalism, I applied for English at a few other universities, got in a few places. I decided I wanted to stay in Toronto, so I ended up at Glendon because I had French throughout my high school time and elementary school. So I was at Glendon, started in English, decided I didn't like it because I didn't realize that English wasn't journalism, it's reading, which I also love, but not my thing. So I switched to sociology because my friend Shannon was in it. Not the best plan, but it was quite serendipitous that it worked out for me, because I also I like that element of people and seeing all of the forces that drive people and make certain things happen in society. So I finished my sociology degree, applied for various jobs while I was still a student. So I had this one position. I was working in for me, a very boring data entry position for the federal government. And I was like, this is sensible. This is very sensible. There was a bridging mechanism where I could get a position after I graduate, good pay, it's reliable, it's the government, let's do this. what I didn't realize that I was bored to tears because it didn't include writing, it didn't include creativity. As data entry, I wasn't seeing the people that this position was helping. So I was entering and I was reading all about why they need this support, but I wasn't actually connecting with anybody at the end, and that was the big key thing that was missing. The other thing that tipped me off was when they asked me to create file folders or something, and I made the most beautiful file folders. I went to town on these with colors, and they're like, you need to chill out with the creativity. So I was like, something's missing. I need to look at something else. So I found a work-study position actually at York, and going from this position that I really didn't like to this position where I got to sit and talk to students about you know, their plans for their careers and going over their resumes and doing all this stuff was just, it was this light went off and I was like, I love this. This is fantastic. I'm going to do this when I grow up. Luckily, I was in my 5th year, so I was already pretty grown up. And I decided that I wanted to stay. I wanted to stick around in university and see what types of positions this could bring to me. So I was lucky enough to get brought on a full-time short-term contract. After that, I applied for a position with student recruitment because as a new grad, I was like, well, what's my most marketable asset? I love to talk, and I'm a new student, so I know all the things about universities, and I'm really relatable to high school students. So I worked as a recruitment officer for a little while. When that contract was done, I moved around within the faculties a little bit. When those contracts were done, I started another contract doing orientation stuff with student community and leadership development. Then that contract was done. There was a lot of contracts. But for me, that was really, really useful because I could use those contracts to strategically build what I was doing and get myself different experiences and different positions that really helped to build my resume in a way that I wouldn't have had if I just said, I want to settle for security. And some people really need that security, and that's totally cool. But for me, I was like, I'm okay with this. I wanted to jump around and try different things. So eventually I found a full-time continuing position. I ran the leadership program here for a couple years. And then eventually I was like, you know what, I really love running the leadership programs. It's all that organizing and helping people become better people. But I was really missing, all I wanted to do all day was write, and I wanted to help advertise the leadership program better than what I was doing, but I couldn't because I was spending all this time doing the logistics, which was fantastic, but I was ready for a change. So I just kept my eye on job postings for a while, and during this whole time as I was doing this, complete side note, I was still writing. I had my own personal blog that I was blogging. I was learning photography because I like to be super controlling over everything creatively that I do. I was learning how to code, so it was all Google. I was just like, you know what, I want 3 columns on my blog instead of 2. Cool, let's just go Google it. So I figured out how to code, I was figuring out all these things, and then a job came up that I was like, this is absolutely perfect. It was the position at Glendon that I'm doing right now. And as a result of all the experiences I had at this campus, and as a result of all the experiences I'd had just teaching myself how to do all these other things, put it all together in my portfolio, applied for this job that I'm in right now, and it's absolutely fantastic. So that I would say is the basic story for me. Yeah.
Well, it seems like it's been a long and winding road for me to become a teacher, but when I look back on my life, one of my earliest memories is when I was about 10 years old. I used to have a little makeshift school for my sister and my cousin. And I used to give them homework every single week, and they hated me for it, and they still remind me about this. But even at that time, even when I was so young, I think I had teaching sort of in the bloodstream. When I was a little bit older, I ran a baseball league for my friends, and I used to love coaching, so the whole teaching thing I think was involved there as well. I did a co-op because I sort of thought I was going to be a grade 2 teacher as well at some point. And the kids were great, but too much of it, I think, wasn't really my thing. So I did the co-op, and then I sort of thought about doing my BED because my mom's a teacher and my dad's a driving instructor. And then I sort of thought, well, maybe that's not for me. So I went to university. I did my BA part-time, and I finished it, I think, in about 8 or 9 years. At the same time, I was just doing different jobs to get myself through school. And so I graduated, and I kind of thought to myself, well, what am I going to do now? And this was around 1999 or 2000, and that was when the dot-com boom was really big. And so I thought to myself, you know what, I need a change. I've been in school for so long, so I'm going to move to Vancouver. And my eventual dream was to move to California and make lots of money and be a web designer or a graphic designer. And so I got there and I worked at a startup, and it was good, and I was making good money. But then, you know, every morning I would go to work and it was just really boring and I felt really unstimulated. And, you know, it kind of occurred to me that, you know, you can be in this really great place, you know, where the weather's great, there's skiing, there's snowboarding, you can make a lot of money, but if the work that you're doing is not what you want to do and it's not challenging, you know, it's you know, it's very, very unfulfilling. So I kind of thought to myself, you know, this was around 2001, what am I going to do now? So I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I applied to grad school, I applied to a bunch of schools, I got accepted to the University of Victoria, I got accepted here. And at that time I was getting a little bit lonely, I was away from my friends and my family, so I came back here. I did my master's degree in English here at York. And that was a really great experience. And I wasn't doing any teaching at that time, but I was doing, you know, I was working as a research assistant here at York, which was great. And it was fun to be reading and being creative and writing again. So, so I did that, and then I took a year off just because I needed a break because the master's degree I found very intense. And then again, I did, you know, some, you know, odd jobs here and there, and then I got bored, and so I applied to do my PhD. And so once again, I came back to York. This was in 2004. And then, you know, when you start here as a graduate student, you get, you know, you're assigned a teaching assistantship. So that's when I started teaching again. And I was very fortunate when I began my teaching career here at York that I worked with one, you know, in my opinion, one of the best teachers here at York. Some of you may know him. His name is Peter Palucci. He was the first person I worked with, and he was amazing. He was my teaching mentor. You know, he taught me so much about, you know, working with students, about grading, about, you know, all the different facets of teaching. So I think that's one of those unexpected moments that you have in your career when, you know, you work with somebody that's really great from the outset. So I worked with him. I taught with him for the first 4 or 5 years here at York. I also met some other great people here, Diana Cooper-Clark and Kim Bird, who helped me along my journey as well. And then in 2009, Kim nominated me for a teaching award here at York, which I won, which was great because it was one on the strength of my evaluations for my students and for my colleagues, which was very humbling. It was great. And so now, yeah, so I'm really involved in teaching here, and now I've started to apply at other places as well. So working at OCAD, which is what I'm doing now, is great as well, but it's a completely different set of students because I'm working with art students now, which is great. They're very creative and they're very fun, but they can be drama queens at times as well. So, so it's a different sort of subset that I'm dealing with. And this past year, I started working at Seneca College as well as a part-time instructor. So I've sort of added the college-level teaching experience sort of to my work experience as well, which is great. And teaching ESL, I sort of thought to myself a couple of years ago, you know, I really want to stay in teaching. University teaching can be it's a little bit challenging at times because of the contractual nature of the work. And so I thought, you know what, I want to stay in teaching, so I have to find a way to do that. So I went and got TESOL certified, so I do ESL teaching as well now. And that's great because you get to meet lots of people from, you know, different countries who are here. It's a completely different mindset as well when they're teaching, when they're learning. So, so it's been a long, winding path, but I'm really glad to be where I am right now. So, yeah.
Thank you all very much for sharing your stories. I think we're hearing some really good advice along the way too. Like if you're interested in working at a university, getting involved right now, and working on campus is a really great way to do it, and getting involved with campus life as well. That's good. And it was interesting to hear about the interest in teaching and being involved with education. And you can teach, but you don't have to teach. There are other things that you can do too to be involved in education. So that's great. Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to open up the Q&A to the floor. If you do have a question, I'd invite you to stand up so we can hear you. And just state whether you're directing your question to the whole panel or just one of the panelists, so we know. And we also ask that you keep your questions broad enough that they are applicable to everyone in the room rather than very specific to your own case. And there will be a chance afterwards during the mix and mingle for you to ask questions that are more particular to you. So what questions do we have? Who would like to ask a question? Yes, in the back, in the scarf.
I just wanted to ask, a lot of your work in administration and have been involved in one way or another with the administration. I want to ask, what does academic administration mean to you? I know that, you can't quite make up the name, but the lady in the red
Lucy?
Lucy.
Lucy. Yeah.
Sorry, way out of the back and back.
That's fine.
Anyway, I just wanted to ask in general, like, what it is that working in academic administration means to you? Because, you know, it's an area where it's like, what is academic administration? What is that? You know?
Okay, great. So the first thing, and I don't think a lot of students, when you're attending university, get this, but within administration, generally, you start in one of two directions when we're outside of the teaching area. And that is, you're either going down the pathway that is traditionally sort of admissions, recruitment. That's great work for people who are newly graduated and want to go out and talk about the university, are very interested in the processes and in the strategy around recruitment for a university. So if that's your interest, that's one of the pathways. The other is what's traditionally called the student affairs or the student life. In the past, they were almost viewed as two solitudes. That is, you started down one path and you either sort of progressed in one area or the other, and they have different requirements. Within the student life, you're really more focused on student development, hence the master's from OISE, which has a focus on higher ed, student development, etc. There you're looking at supporting students. It's a longer term relationship with students. Quite often at the earliest stages of your career, you're coordinating or facilitating some programming. So you're more the type of person, and quite often, but not naturally, an extrovert who is into the student leadership, the student life, the resident side, the engagement side. The other side is again, really fascinating in terms of marketing, processes, strategy, systems thinking. So if you like using systems, the registrarial, administrative, that side is a great place to start your career. The one caution I have, and it's done me well, is try and cross those bridges. And I hear that consistently from the other panel members. That is, if you start in recruitment, it used to be your next step was admissions and you worked up that way, which is great if it's your interest. But you can also pop over to the other side and begin the programming and understand more about student development and how to support students in areas like Career Center or those sorts of areas. Does that answer your question? I love fixing. That's what I loved about administration. I'm just one of those people, it's not always the best trait. You walk into a room and it's immaculate, but one picture's crooked. And I see that picture and it's my thrill. And in administration, that's what I get to do. I see what's broken. I see what no longer works for this generation of students, and I get to work with excited, energized people on how to transition it and create. And that's also what I heard consistently on the panel. If you're someone who likes change and creativity, there's lots of those opportunities. And again, I really want to stress the university sector and the college sector. And I've had the pleasure of working in both. Different opportunities, equally enjoyable. Don't ignore that sector. And I see Kathleen in the back, so she's nodding. She knows that sector as well.
What other questions do we have? Yes, in the back.
Hi. Thank you to everyone for sharing your stories. I'm a doctoral student, and one of my personal interests is research. I really like putting pieces together, and I like being in archives, and I like finding new solutions. I like research in that way. Can you speak, and could any one of you speak to the ways in which your job uses research, or even what percentage of your job is involved in just generally that thrust, that kind of thinking?
Yeah.
Would you like to start?
Okay. Again, because of the opportunity of where I'm at now, nothing goes forward without research. So, for example, Nessie if we want to change a pathway, you first have to prove to the institution that it's broken, because that's not the starting point of everyone else. Sometimes, you know, if it worked in 1827, let's not fuss with it now. So I do a great deal of research in terms of surveys, interviews, focus groups, digging into the literature, because student development theory will guide the reasons. Then you get the assessments, and as best as you can present that so that you can then get the funding in order to launch something new. At a university in particular, you are challenged if you have not done your research. But I also would try and guide you to some areas of universities that is what they do. I assume York still has ISR. Institutional research, fabulous place, and government relations. Primarily what we're doing is research and looking at policy changes. Government relations is an advocacy area that works with a government or advocates government. So we spend a great deal in those areas. Almost 100% of that time would be research. So for example, if we believe more PhD students should have opportunities, universities should have more PhD students, we're going to do a ton of research. We're going to find the practices around the world, and then we're going to present that to government. So I'd say if that's your area, there are particular jobs where it's 100%, but certainly within any area you want to present something, we start with research.
Who else would like to speak to research in their jobs?
I can speak to a different angle of research.
Go for it.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that you said, I see elements of that in what I do. Especially in the recruitment side of things with marketing, right? We want to make sure that, you know, we're doing our focus groups and we're making sure we hit our target markets the way that we want to and as effectively as we possibly can. But also with my job, a lot of the website work that we do entails a ton of research and data analysis. So if it's best practices in user experience, we want to make sure that we're putting as small details like micro content, so the text we're putting on buttons, doing A/B testing, having focus groups, card sorting exercises, that kind of stuff. If you're doing website redevelopment, there's a ton of the front-end research, but then also testing for best practices with various programs that we're using and everything. So it's a slightly different kind. It's not social research, but it's still, there's a big element of that within the marketing and web digital area as well. So same thing with social media. I mean, it's all metrics. It's all pulling those numbers to determine what your reach is, so that you can show the return on investment. Because a lot of times people see social media as something that we just do, but they don't necessarily look at the value of it in terms of what that return on investment is. So you can spend X number of dollars on a buzz advertisement, but if you do a little bit of legwork and you invest in, say, Facebook ads, Twitter ads, anything like that, then you can create such a more impactful reach. So that element of research is definitely big within my position. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you know, I'm a teacher, but I'm also a doctoral student as well. Mm-hmm. And I can definitely say that, you know, good teaching is informed by good research, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, the teachers that, you know what's going on in their particular field, it's going to make their teaching, you know, so much better. But I also think that the other element that's important is, for example, attending conferences. And I know that, you know, for example, you know, when I finished my TESOL certificate, TESOL has a really great conference every year which has, you know, new ideas, new theories around second language learning. And I think attending those kinds of things on a regular basis definitely makes you a better teacher. And the university itself has lots of great conferences, you know, and little workshops about, you know, how to, for example, you know, get students to talk more in the classroom, or, you know, how to deliver a stronger lecture. So those kinds of things, I think it's important to take advantage of those in the university, because they're here, you know, to make you a better teacher. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is it necessary, do you think? I mean, I see that a lot of you have 4 out of 5 actually of the panel have had, and well, no, not Lucy, I don't remember, but have had a very direct interest in education, like that was your first dream, as it were. And I'm wondering if you think that that is something that's perhaps somewhere in the top 3 of what's needed to go into administration, or do you believe that there are opportunities for people who are more into, you know, who have started with business admin or with, or, you know, I can see how marketing comes into play, but who don't necessarily have education or something, or those kinds of very strong backgrounds?
So if you don't have an interest or background in education,
Yeah.
What are the opportunities like?
Yeah.
The opportunities, especially, I mean, look at York, the size of York. There is not an opportunity, an inclination, a profession that you cannot find at this institution.
True.
So there's an institution of higher learning is still a business. There is a whole finance side. So if your interests and passion are on the finance side, there's massive areas there. There's a marketing aspect because people need to know about York University in order to come. There's a research aspect because you don't develop anything new, you don't present anything without doing that. So I would say, while it was my interest, anything you're interested in, you will find some aspect of it within a university. It's just the nature, whether it's teaching, whether it's career counseling. I mean, I look at my services, we have counselors and we have doctors, and I have, CAO won't mean a lot to you, chief administrative officers running, we're a 22 million, my division is a $22 million shop, so I've got people with that, I've got writers, we're running websites, so I need web creators. So even within my division, but think of a larger university, really anything that is your passion, you're going to find opportunities within an academic institution. So it's not just education. That happened to just be something I was interested in.
Does anyone else want to add anything to that? Yeah, me?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I have a question actually for Reginald. You say that you teach here and you also are teaching at OCAD in Seneca.
Yes.
And I wondered if you could just chat a little bit about the differences and why you went to Seneca and what you find with the students there, what enriches you, what the challenges are and the differences?
Well, part of it was just, you know, out of necessity, because I wanted to broaden my sort of, you know, the areas in which I work, so I'd have more opportunities. But the thing I love about the Seneca students is that when they get into the classroom, they're geared to work, and a lot of them are ESL students as well. Like, they've come here and they're, for example, doing a certificate in hospitality. So, you know, they're here, they're very eager to learn. I would say one of the main differences is that the education is more career-based, you know, so it's less theoretical, you know, and having said that, that's not to say that, you know, they're not interested in things that are not, you know, quote-unquote practical. Just last week I was teaching them a class on rhetoric, so we were looking at different essays and speeches, and they were really, really geared up about it. So I would say one of the best things I love about working at Seneca, for example, is the students and their excitement and the passion that they come into the classroom with, because many of them, you know, are from a different country. They're taking, they don't take education for granted, for example. To them, it's a privilege that they're actually here in Canada learning, and that to me is one of the best things about working there. So, yeah.
Are there any other differences that you think are worth noting between a college and a university, and the opportunities, or what it's like to work there, the culture?
One of the things I've noticed is that, at least when I'm at Union campus at Seneca, is it's less overwhelming, right? So there's more of sort of, you know, a smaller feel to it, and, you know, whereas here it's often hard to get stuff done when you want to. Over there, like, for example, when I need to get photocopying done, I just walk into the office and they're like, "Oh, sure, Reggie, you know, we'll do it for you right here. It's no problem." So the sort of the, you know, the more comfortable feel of the college, I really, really appreciate and I like. So it's a nice change when I'm teaching at OCAD in York and then I go to Seneca. So.
Yes?
First off, thank you for being here and sharing your stories and perspectives. My question is to the whole panel. In starting out with a career in administration, do you think that your experiences along the way, such as work studies and whatnot, or your education is more valuable for you?
I would say both. I wouldn't have gotten interested in higher education if I didn't start participating in the institution, in the fabric of this institution, student government, student clubs, different activities on the campus, attending lectures and workshops. It's my participation and my experience that got me interested. I really wanted to be a grade 2 teacher, and that was all I could think about at the time. And you know, when that doesn't, when what you're thinking that you're going to do your whole life, since I was a little girl, doesn't pan out for you because you suddenly lose interest, you've got to explore a bit, right? And I think I think having been a student here gives you a certain perspective into the institution. But I knew as I was going through my career path that, and because I was really interested in the academic governance side of the institution, so how decisions get made, supporting the curriculum, the more academic rather than the student affairs, or the sort of admissions recruitment side, that I really needed to expand my education. Like, I needed to do a graduate degree so that I could understand systems of higher education. I mean, when I was thinking about this, who knew there was a whole literature in higher education, right? They're talking to the researcher. Oh, who knew? It was fascinating. So, and that's where I developed such an interest and a passion. And I think the opportunity to stay at one institution, but have about a dozen different careers, is I couldn't imagine anything better for my career, my life.
For me in my position, my supervisor actually told me one of the things she looks for is previous experience working in post-secondary. So a big help for me was I had a couple work study positions under my belt, not at the school that I ended up working at, but one at York and one at George Brown, and my placement opportunity in post-secondary as well. So that experience in post-secondary was one of the biggest things she looked for. That being said, my degree in psychology was also a factor because one of the programs that I'm working with at Guelph-Humber is the psychology program, and so having a bit of that background also definitely came into play. And that's something that was very specific to the particular role that I'm in, and sort of just by chance and having a lot of the right things that she was looking for. But definitely it's both the degree and experience in my case.
I would say for me, it was both. But I'd say without my degree, like my degree in sociology helped me, even though it doesn't directly relate. Like if the students I'm talking to right now, they're like, oh, so you went to school for communications? No. The degree in sociology helped me learn, firstly, qualitative and quantitative methods of research. I hated that class. I loved it because of like the data nerd thing, but it was really hard, and to be honest, I didn't do well. But I really enjoyed the class, and the things that I learned, I apply to my job now, which blew my mind. I was like, oh, it's good. Like, it's good that I took that class. The other thing that sociology helped me do was think of, approach my life and approach the various jobs I've had with a wider perspective. So while I'm thinking about, you know, when I was running the leadership program, thinking about the programming that I'm doing, thinking about how this is going to be accessible for single parents, how this is accessible for students with accessibility issues, like all these variety of elements that you're taught to study and consider in sociology, that definitely helped me consider, just to remember that it's not just me. Other people are using the programs and the websites and all the things that I create. It's not just about me, it's about other people. So more of a user-focused perspective and a student-focused perspective, which, I mean, when you're working in a university, you have to be looking at the students. You can never just be looking at yourself or at your program. That being said, the experiences that I had while I was a student played into it quite a bit as well. I mean, I may not have started looking for work study positions if it weren't for the fact that I had this really awful data entry position. and then that would have never brought, like, I wouldn't have forgotten those work study positions if it weren't for the fact that I was already in university studying sociology, you know, so it's kind of, it's very wrapped up in a big ball. But I would say very heavily on the experience and a lot on my degree as well.
And I think they're inseparable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what a student is majoring in, it's absolutely irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
But at U of T, frankly, just about every one of our positions in the student life side will require a master's degree. We have some students who have worked with us for years, complete a bachelor's degree. We'll hire them because of the experience, and I do stand correct, it's not just the work experience. It could be a don, it could be a volunteer, but someone who can speak to the experience of working within the context of what they're applying for. But if they don't have a master's degree, once we hire them, we put them right on a master's path. And most OISE can facilitate that quite easily. But we have an expectation of lifelong learning, so you can't separate them. A few years ago, I became interested in conflict, oddly enough, major part of my job. So I'm with Osgood finishing an LLM. Because it is if we're working in an educational environment, our expectation is that we're lifelong learners and reflecting that as well. So you can't really separate them. I need both. A PhD graduate who has done nothing other, and again, it doesn't have to be full-time work, it can be just what they've done within their program, heading up the student organization or the course union or the student government. Those two together, the PhD with no experience, you won't get hired. And tons of experience without the academic qualifications also won't get hired. So it's really they're complementary.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Yes?
Firstly, I really appreciate all of you sharing your stories. I think a lot of you mentioned like a lot of your jobs are involving things like building relationships across in different departments and working with people. And also Lucy mentioned that it's really a job for extrovert people. How about people that are not necessarily outgoing or extroverted?
Yeah. Tons of opportunities. So there's the opportunities to work directly with students. And there's always the folks that's really what they want, whether it's, of course, teaching or within the services. But then there's that whole machinery that's happening behind the scenes, the preparation for that, the planning, the strategy, the IT, the communications, the research. There are, I'd say, as many opportunities for the introvert, the ones who are not comfortable. We had someone in one of my departments who wanted to try, and that's a wonderful thing about institutions, secondments and these opportunities to try briefly. Because she was an introvert, but there was a really interesting job. It was in the Career Center, actually. It was directly involved with facilitating. She had taught, but facilitating was very different. So we gave her an introduction for that for about just over 6 weeks. And she came back and said, you know what I learned about myself? I'm not comfortable in that situation. So now she's learned that, and her career path follows something that sits well. So understand yourself, understand your values, understand where you're comfortable and where you're not, and there's lots of opportunities. It's not just for those outgoing people that want to stand at the front of the room and, you know, organize all these leadership. That takes a certain personality.
Confession time, I'm an introvert. Go figure. In my work, I don't often present, so this is tough on me today. This is all part of learning, right? Here I am, I'm at work and I'm learning, and I'm always trying to improve myself. But some aspects of my job require me to be out there. And some aspects of my job are very quiet, very focused, thinking through problems, building systems, reaching out in small groups to solve problems across the institution. So it's not necessarily all sort of extroverted work, but I mean, you need to have a little bit of courage, us introverts, and we lead in a very different way. But over the course of my career, I've led small teams and I've led large teams. My team at the moment is over 100 people. So it's a little bit of balance.
With being a teacher, it would be a little more challenging to be an introvert, but I can be kind of an introvert sometimes, and I find that sometimes, you know, when I'm about to go teach and I'm really nervous and I don't feel like doing it, I just pretend that I'm on stage and I have to give a performance, and that sort of helps me get into that particular mindset. But I think a good advice, if you know you maybe want to be a teacher and you feel like you're an introvert, is start with tutoring, because maybe in a one-on-one relationship, you know, if you're an introvert, it's not as intimidating, and that can sort of let you know whether, you know, you'd be it can build up your confidence, but also let you know whether you'd be, you know, gradually more comfortable speaking in front of a larger group of people. But, you know, in terms of teaching, I think tutoring is a good place to start.
Jamie, I saw you raise your hand a little bit. Did you have something to add?
I mean, I would also not class myself as overly extroverted. And I do run workshops and employer outreach and a lot of stuff that is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but there's a lot of stuff in my position that is very comfortable as someone who's a little more introverted, and that I really enjoy. So I love one-on-one appointments with students, sitting down with them, helping them sort of pair out their skills and things that they've learned on their previous jobs and help them market that successfully. And I think that for me what it takes is, again, so stepping outside of your comfort zone a little bit, and then remembering what it is you need when you're in situations like that. So for me it means I need to prepare a little bit more before I go into a presentation. But it doesn't mean that I'm not able to do a presentation. And it doesn't mean that I'm not able to still share the information with people. So I think the biggest thing is to know yourself and know what you can do, and know what you want to do. And if you're working towards where you want to be, even if some parts of the job take a little bit of courage, it's still a really great learning experience.